The cold October wind whistled across the empty street, rattling the loose shutters of the condemned apartments, and carrying the sharp scent of dried leaves and rain. Emma Miller pulled her thin cotton dress tighter around her small frame, though it did little to block the chill. At just 6 years old, she was far too young to be out in the night alone, yet her deep blue eyes held a determination far older than her years. In one hand she clutched Mr. Whiskers, her threadbare stuffed rabbit, the one companion who never failed her. She whispered to him softly, as though he could hear, "We have to do this. Mommy hasn't eaten in 2 days. Just scraps, just something small." Before her loomed the Harrington estate, its iron gates like the open jaws of a monster waiting to swallow her whole. She had always seen them shut tight when she passed on her way to school, guarded by cameras and men in pressed suits. Tonight, by some stroke of luck or fate, they had been left ajar after the gardener's late departure. Golden light spilled from the enormous windows, music and laughter drifting out so loud, so full of life it felt like another world. A world of plenty. A world where people threw away food that could keep her and her mother alive for a week. Her small feet carried her across the gravel driveway, each crunch sounding loud in her ears. She stayed close to the manicured hedges, her breath catching every time she thought she heard a voice. The mansion loomed above her like a glowing mountain, its tall windows shining with warmth that contrasted cruelly with the ache in her belly and the cold gnawing her skin. She pressed her lips together and whispered again, "It's not for me, just for Mommy." Rounding the back, she spotted the service entrance. It looked less grand than the front, but still more polished than anything she'd ever touched. The brass handle gleamed, and the heavy wooden frame towered over her. Emma stretched on her toes, her little hand barely reaching high enough to knock. Her knuckles made only the faintest tap against the thick door, a sound so small it was swallowed instantly by the music inside. She tried again, harder this time, her fists still too tiny to do more than whisper against the wood. For a moment she stood in the darkness, the cold creeping through her dress, her courage waning. She thought of her mother, pale and coughing in their one-room apartment, pushing away food so Emma could eat instead. That thought gave her strength. She raised her hand once more, preparing to try again, when suddenly the door creaked open. Emma stumbled back a step, clutching Mr. Whiskers against her chest. A tall man in a black suit filled the doorway, his sharp eyes narrowing as he looked down at her. She opened her mouth, but her voice caught, barely a whisper. I'm sorry to bother you, sir. I was wondering if maybe you had some food left over. Just scraps would be fine." Her throat tightened, but she forced the words out. "It's not for me. It's for my mommy. She's sick." For a moment, the man only stared. Emma braced herself for anger, for a shout to chase her away into the night. Instead, something softened in his face. His voice, though stern, was not unkind. "Wait here." And before she could answer, he disappeared inside, leaving Emma trembling in the cold. The great house behind him glowing like a golden palace she did not belong to. She stood there, heart pounding, hugging her rabbit tight. The suspense stretched, on with each second, the laughter inside the mansion mocking the silence around her. She had no idea if food would come, or if punishment would, but she knew one thing she had tried. For her mother, and that love, fierce and selfless and such, a tiny body, was the first spark that would soon light a fire inside the heart of the man who lived in the great house. The library smelled faintly of smoke and old leather, its walls lined with shelves that seemed to stretch endlessly, each one groaning under the weight of knowledge Emma could not begin to imagine. She stood small and trembling at the threshold, her stuffed rabbit pressed close against her chest, her eyes darting to the enormous fireplace where the flames roared as if alive. In front of it sat a man unlike any she had ever seen. His gray hair was brushed back neatly, his face sharp with lines of age, power, and pain. And though his body sat in a gleaming wheelchair of polished metal, it was his eyes that struck Emma most cold, penetrating. The eyes of a man who could see right through her. "So," he said, his voice deep and slow, each word heavy like a stone, "you're the little beggar at my back door." Emma swallowed hard, her small fingers tightening around Mr. Whiskers. I'm sorry, sir," she stammered. "I didn't mean to intrude. It's just, my mommy hasn't eaten in 2 days, and I thought maybe there might be leftovers." The man let out a low sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a growl. "Leftovers." He leaned forward slightly, the firelight throwing harsh shadows across his face. "Do you know who I am, child?" Emma hesitated, then nodded timidly. You're Mr. Harrington. You own this big house, and then other things too. A faint, bitter smile touched his lips. Correct. I own many things, more than you can possibly understand. But do you know what I don't own? He struck the side of his wheelchair with his hand, the sharp metallic clang making Emma flinch. These legs, all my money, all my power, and I can't buy back the ability to walk. 3 years, and not a single step. The fire popped, sending sparks upward, and Emma blinked against the brightness. She didn't know what to say, so she whispered, I'm sorry, sir, for a long moment. Richard Harrington studied her in silence, as though she were some puzzle he had never encountered. Then, suddenly, he laughed. It was not the laughter of joy but of cruelty, the kind that made the room colder despite the fire. Tell you what, little beggar, I'll make you a deal. His eyes glinted, daring her to respond. Make me walk again, and the leftovers are yours. In fact, I'll throw in a feast for you and your sick mother. How's that for a bargain? The cruelty of the words cut deeper than any shout, but Emma, too young to understand sarcasm, too earnest to hear the mockery, nodded. May I try, sir? She asked quietly. The laughter died on Richard's lips. He had expected her to shrink, to run away, to cry. Instead, she stood before him with solemn blue eyes that carried no trace of fear, only a strange determination. For a moment, he was thrown off balance, his mouth opening but no sound escaping. Then he leaned back slowly in his chair, his expression hardening again. You actually believe you can do what the best doctors in the world could not? Emma clutched Mr. Whiskers tighter. I don't know, sir, but Mommy says we should always try, even when things seem impossible. Her words cut through him like glass. Always try. When was the last time he had tried? For years. He had surrendered to bitterness, hiding behind money, lawyers, and his fortress-like home. And now this child, barefoot and hungry, dared to speak. Of trying. Something inside him bristled. Something inside him cracked. Fine, he said at last, his voice sharp, but his hand trembling slightly on the armrest. Come here then, miracle worker. Show me what all the world's physicians could not. Emma's small shoes tapped softly against the marble floor as she approached. The fire threw her shadow across the rug, tiny but unafraid. She stopped beside his chair and tilted her face upward. What's his name? Richard asked suddenly, nodding toward the rabbit. Mr. Whiskers, Emma replied, her voice steady now. He helps me be brave. Well, you need all the courage you can get. My legs have been useless since the day a car destroyed them. He said it coldly, as if daring her to turn away, but Emma only nodded with childlike innocence. She placed her tiny hand on his knee. Richard almost sneered, ready to dismiss her when he froze. A warmth, a tingling, something he had not felt in 3 long years spread from the place where her hand rested. His eyes widened, his mouth half open, his cynicism melted, replaced with a raw, unguarded terror that perhaps he was no longer in control of his own fate. Emma looked up at him calmly, almost knowingly. Can you feel that, Mr. Harrington? He wanted to say no. He wanted to deny it, but the truth blazed through his body like fire awakening frozen limbs. Impossible, he whispered. His right foot shifted barely a centimeter, but enough to break the universe he thought he knew. For the first time in years, Richard Harrington felt hope, though it came laced with fear. And standing before him, her hand still on his knee, the little girl who had come begging for scraps had already begun to rewrite his life. The fire had burned lower in the library, the wood collapsing into glowing embers. But Richard Harrington barely noticed. His chest heaved with the shock of what had just happened. His damn toes had moved. His legs, dead to him for 3 long years, had stirred under the touch of a child no taller than his armrest. Emma stood beside him, her small hand still pressed against his knee. Her face lifted with that strange mixture of innocence and gravity. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't even surprised. She just looked at him as though this were the most natural thing in the world. Did it work, sir? She asked, her voice small, but steady. Richard opened his mouth, then shut it again. He was a man who had commanded boardrooms, bullied politicians, bought and sold companies like toys. He always had an answer, but now he was speechless. His mind raced. Coincidence, he told himself. A nerve spasm, phantom reflex. Yet when he glanced down, the evidence glared back at him. His foot had moved. His flesh had warmed. Before he could respond, The heavy oak doors creaked open. Gloria, his housekeeper of 20 years, entered, her expression tight with concern. "Sir, your guests are waiting." She stopped mid-sentence when she saw the child standing beside his chair. "Out," Richard snapped, harsher than intended. He didn't want witnesses. Not yet. Gloria's brows furrowed, but she bowed slightly and withdrew, closing the door behind her. The silence returned, thick and heavy. Richard turned back to Emma. His voice trembled despite himself. "Do it again." Emma blinked. "What do you mean?" "Touch my knees again." She obeyed without question, placing both tiny palms against him this time. The sensation returned instantly, stronger now. Not the dull whisper of nerves, but something fierce, alive. His legs tingled as if falling from an endless frost. His muscles, long forgotten, twitched beneath her touch. Richard's heart slammed in his chest. "Move," he ordered himself. He stared at his toes, willing them, begging them, and then sluggish, but undeniable, his right foot shifted forward. "My God," his voice cracked. For years he had cursed heaven, cursed fate, cursed the day his car hit that other vehicle. He had abandoned prayer, abandoned hope, yet here was this girl, this beggar child, pulling him back into life with hands no larger than his cufflinks. Emma tilted her head. It worked again. He looked at her sharply, suspicion slicing through the wonder. "Who sent you?" Her brow furrowed. "What? Was it Michael?" His voice hardened. "Is this some trick my son arranged? Some scheme to get his inheritance early? You're planted here, aren't you?" Emma's wide blue eyes filled with confusion, even fear. "No one sent me, sir. I just wanted food for my mommy." Richard leaned forward, searching her face for deception, the way he had studied rivals in corporate wars. But all he found was raw, unguarded innocence. The truth, staring back at him with a rabbit in her arms, for the first time in years. He felt unsteady, and not because of his legs. He pressed the button on his chair. Moments later, Gloria reappeared. "Sir, have the kitchen pack up all the leftovers from tonight. Every scrap, and prepare a full basket of food, enough for a family." Then, his voice faltered as he glanced at Emma, her dress threadbare, her shoes worn thin. "Bring the car around. I'm taking her home myself." Gloria's eyes widened, but she nodded. Richard turned back to Emma, his sharpness softening, if only a fraction. "Where do you live, girl?" Emma hesitated. "West Side Apartments, Building C." "But it's not really an apartment anymore. Just one room." Richard stiffened. He knew the place. The city had condemned half that building. Rats, mold, collapsing ceilings, and this child lived there. A rare pang struck his chest, sharper than any nerve jolt. For years, he had walled himself off, convinced he had nothing left to care about but his fortune and his bitterness. Yet here was a little girl, barely able to reach his doorknob, tearing through his defenses with nothing but honesty. As Gloria led Emma out to wait, Richard sat alone in the flickering firelight, his hand trembling against his knee. His foot had moved, his blood stirred. He should have been elated, triumphant. Instead, for the first time in a long time, he was afraid, because if what had just happened was real, then his entire world was about to change, and he did not know if he was ready. The streets grew darker as the limousine rolled past boarded-up storefronts and crumbling brick walls. The further they drove from the glittering avenues of Boston, the more the city showed its forgotten bones, abandoned lots, graffiti-covered fences, children in tattered clothes huddling under broken street lamps. Inside the car, Emma pressed her face to the glass, watching the familiar world of her neighborhood approach with a mixture of relief and embarrassment. She clutched Mr. Whiskers tightly, whispering to him as though the rabbit could understand her. "Almost home. Mommy will be so happy. She'll have soup tonight. Real soup." Richard Harrington sat across from her, his fingers steepled under his chin, studying her like an unsolvable riddle. His eyes had softened slightly since the library, but suspicion still flickered there. Each shift of sensation in his legs gnawed at him, equal parts hope and terror. What had happened back in his study defied every medical certainty he had clung to, every grim diagnosis. And now he was driving into the belly of poverty itself, following the child who had dared to make him believe in miracles again. The limousine stopped in front of a sagging building, with boarded windows and a rusted fire escape that looked ready to collapse. A faint yellow light flickered from one window on the second floor, struggling against the darkness. Richard's jaw tightened. This was no place for anyone to live, let alone a child. Emma climbed out eagerly, hugging the food basket Gloria had packed. She turned and smiled at him shyly. "This is us, sir. Apartment 14. Mommy's waiting." The driver opened Richard's door and helped him maneuver the wheelchair onto the cracked sidewalk. He grimaced. The scent of rot and mildew thick in the air. The sound of distant shouting drifted down the block. It was a world he had long paid others to keep far away from his own. Yet here he was, wheeling himself into its heart. Up the narrow stairwell, the peeling paint flaked under his hands as he pulled himself upward. Emma skipped ahead, her small shoes clattering on the wooden steps, each one groaning under her weight. At the top, she paused, nervous suddenly, as though she could already feel her mother's shame. Pressing against the door, she knocked gently. "Mommy, it's me. I brought food." The door opened, and Sarah Miller stood there, pale and thin in the weak light of a single bulb. Her hair was limp, her sweater threadbare, her shoulders hunched with exhaustion, but her eyes tired as they were lit up the moment she saw her daughter. Relief flashed across her face, followed swiftly by confusion when she noticed the basket, and then the man in the wheelchair. "Emma, what? Who?" Her voice trembled. "This is Mr. Harrington, Mommy," Emma said proudly. "He brought U.S. food, lots of it." She pulled the basket into the room, already eager to show the contents. "There's chicken and potatoes and vegetables and even cake." Sarah's gaze snapped to Richard, her expression tightening with suspicion. She recognized him instantly. His face had graced countless newspapers and business magazines. "Mr. Harrington," she murmured, almost in disbelief. "Why would you come here?" Richard wheeled himself slowly across the threshold, his sharp eyes scanning the small room. The cracked plaster walls, the single bed pushed into the corner, the hot plate on a milk crate, the damp laundry strung across the window. It was worse than he expected. He had seen poverty from a distance, but to be inside it, smelling it, feeling it, was different. "Because your daughter knocked on my door," he said simply. "She asked for food, not for herself, but for you." Sarah's cheeks flushed with shame. She crossed her arms, trying to gather what dignity she could. "I didn't send her. We are not beggars, Mommy," Emma whispered, tugging her sleeve. "You hadn't eaten. I couldn't just let you." "Emma," Sarah's voice cracked, but her eyes softened as she knelt and pulled her daughter close. "Oh, sweetheart, I know, but you must never." Richard's voice cut in, sharper than intended. "Don't scold her." Both mother and daughter turned to him. His expression hardened. "She did what you could not. She asked for help, and in doing so," his voice faltered for the first time, the memory of his toes twitching still echoing through his nerves. "She did something no doctor on earth could." Sarah blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Richard leaned forward, his gaze locked on hers. "I felt my legs tonight, for the first time in 3 years, and it was because of your daughter." The words hung heavy in the stale air, unbelievable yet impossible to ignore. Sarah shook her head slowly. That's not possible." "I would have said the same thing yesterday," Richard said grimly, "but I saw it. I felt it. Your daughter is extraordinary." Emma looked between them, puzzled by the weight in their voices. "Did I do something bad?" Sarah's heart broke at the innocence in her tone. She gathered Emma into her arms. "No, baby, you didn't do anything bad. You could never." Richard watched, something shifting in his chest, a strange, unfamiliar ache. For years, he had armored himself in cynicism and steel, but watching this child cling to her fragile mother, watching Sarah's eyes glisten with fear and pride all at once, something cracked. He realized with startling clarity that he was not in control of this moment, nor the destiny it hinted at Dot, and that truth terrified him more than the loss of his legs ever had. Richard Harrington had not slept that night. He sat in his study, the flames in the fireplace burning low, shadows stretching long across the floor. His mind raced with images. He could not banish Emma's small hands on his knees, the impossible warmth in his legs, the twitch of his foot, the way Sarah had looked at him as though torn between terror and hope. He had faced hostile boardrooms, hostile governments, even hostile competitors who wanted him ruined. But never before had he faced something that unraveled both his certainty and his cynicism in a single evening. Dot at dawn, he ordered Gloria to bring Sarah and Emma to the estate's main hall. Sarah hesitated, but Emma, still clutching Mr. Whiskers, led the way. Richard sat waiting in his wheelchair, his back straight, his sharp eyes scanning them like an attorney interrogating a witness. Yesterday, he said, voice measured, your daughter did something doctors told me was impossible. This morning, I intend to see if it was chance or if it was real. Sarah stiffened, her thin hands clenching at her sides. She's only a child, Mr. Harrington. You can't treat her like some experiment. Richard's jaw tightened. This isn't a game, Mrs. Miller. If what happened last night is real, it changes everything. Not just for me, for her, for you, perhaps for the world. Emma looked between them, confused but calm. It's okay, Mommy. I want to help. She stepped forward, her little shoes squeaking against the marble. Mr. Harrington, do you want me to try again? His breath caught. Part of him wanted to shout no, to retreat back into disbelief. But another part, the part that had felt sensation for the first time in 3 years, leaned forward. Yes, again. Emma pressed her tiny palms against his knees. This time she closed her eyes. Her lips pursed in concentration. Silence filled the hall. Richard felt it almost instantly, that rising warmth, that surge like a current flooding dead wires. His jaw clenched, his hands gripping the armrests. The sensation traveled lower, to his calves, his ankles, then his toes. Move. He whispered to himself, the command of a general urging soldiers into battle. Slowly, painfully, his right foot jerked, then the left. It was no spasm. He felt the strain, the effort. He was controlling them. Sarah gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. Dear God, Richard's voice trembled. Help me up. No. Sarah cried, but Gloria had already rushed forward, between her and Richard's own iron well. He pushed himself upright. His legs trembled violently, muscles screaming in protest after years of atrophy. He gritted his teeth, sweat breaking on his brow, but he stood, Emma's face lit with awe. You're doing it. You're really doing it. For 10 seconds, 20, 30. Richard Harrington stood on his own defeat, the mighty man who had once ruled companies, who had fallen into bitterness and despair, was rising from the ashes of his broken body. His chest heaved with exertion, but his eyes burned with something fiercer than fire hope. When he collapsed back into the chair, he was not defeated. He was transformed. But even in that moment of triumph, the seeds of conflict were already sown. A voice cut through the silence. Well, this is quite the performance. The doors to the hall opened, and a man in a tailored suit strode in. Tall, with Richard's same sharp jawline, but a colder, younger edge. His eyes glittered with skepticism. Michael Harrington, Richard's only son. Richard's elation faltered. Michael's gaze flicked from his father to Emma, to Sarah, then back again. His tone was flat, mocking. I get a call from Dr. Wilson claiming you made miraculous progress. I rush here thinking perhaps the old man finally found a new experimental treatment. But instead I find. He gestured toward Emma. This Emma shrank back, clutching Mr. Whiskers. Sarah stepped protectively in front of her. It's not a trick. Richard growled. You're looking at what she's done for me, what no one else could do. Michael's laugh was sharp and humorless. A beggar child. Father, please. Do you expect me to believe that years of paralysis were undone by a 6-year-old in a ragged dress? He looked at Sarah with narrowed eyes. And you? How convenient. Appearing out of nowhere with a miracle child just as your health declines. Sarah's cheeks burned with fury. I didn't send her to your door. She went on her own. She's just a child trying to feed her mother, and yet somehow she revives you. Michael's voice dripped with disdain. Do you not see how absurd this sounds? How dangerous? If the press caught wind of this, the vultures would descend. Governments, corporations, every desperate patient clawing at your gates. And who controls it all? You, Father, or them? Richard's eyes hardened. Enough. But Michael leaned closer, his words striking like daggers. Or is this about guilt? You couldn't save your wife. You couldn't save yourself. So now, you're clinging to this child as salvation. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. Richard's hand shook on the armrests, his bitterness, his failures, his years of isolation all laid bare by his son's cruel precision. Then, Emma's small voice broke the tension. I didn't want to trick anyone. I just wanted Mommy to eat. Her blue eyes, steady and sincere, locked on Michael's. You don't have to believe me, but Mr. Harrington stood. I saw it. You saw it. That's not a trick. Michael faltered, just for a moment, as though the purity in her words pierced through his armor. But he quickly turned away, muttering, It won't last. Richard's jaw clenched. Get out, Michael. Until you can speak with respect, leave my house. Michael hesitated, his face dark, then spun on his heel and stormed out in the hall. The echoes of his departure lingered, but Richard's gaze shifted back to Emma. His voice was low. Rough, you've done more than heal my legs. You've reminded me what it means to fight. And for that, Emma Miller, I am in your debt. Emma tilted her head, puzzled. Does that mean Mommy can have medicine now? Richard looked at Sarah. For the first time in years, he smiled, not the cold smile of a businessman, but something softer. Yes, she'll have medicine, she'll have care, and you, child, will have far more than leftovers. But deep inside, Richard knew Michael was right about one thing. The world would not stay blind to what had just begun in this house. And when they came for Emma, the fight would be far greater than he had ever imagined. The storm did not come from the skies. It came from whispers, from screams, from the hungry mouths of those who smelled a miracle and wanted to own it. It began the mornings after Michael's visit. Richard sat in his study, his cane leaning against the desk, the fire roaring though he no longer needed its warmth. His legs could hold him now, unsteady, but real. A truth so precious, it still startled him each time he stood. He was reviewing Sarah's latest medical charts when Gloria burst. In her face pale, she carried a tablet in her trembling hands. Sir, you need to see this. Richard frowned, irritated at the interruption, but when he looked down, his blood turned cold. The headline glared from the screen. Miracle Child heals Boston tycoon's paralysis. Secret cure hidden behind mansion gates. The article did not name Emma outright, but the details were unmistakable. A wealthy businessman, long paralyzed, now walking again thanks to an unnamed child. Hints of the Harrington estate. A mysterious mother and daughter suddenly living under his roof. Richard's knuckles whitened against the desk. He didn't need to ask who had betrayed him. His son's fingerprints were all over this. Where is Emma? He demanded. In the garden, Gloria whispered. She's teaching the gardener's granddaughter to braid flowers into Mr. Whisker's ears. The image tore at him, a child playing, innocent. Unknowing of the storm gathering beyond the iron gates. By afternoon, the reporters arrived. 3 vans at first, then 5, then more. They lined the street with cameras, shouting questions at passing cars, hurling guesses at the gates. Security reported drones buzzing the estate. One even crashed into the garden hedge. Sarah watched from an upstairs window, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. They know. She whispered, her voice raw. Richard, they know. They'll never leave us alone now. We'll contain it, Richard insisted, though his voice betrayed doubt. Emma padded into the room, holding Mr. Whiskers. Why are there people outside with cameras? Are they here for you? Mr. Harrington? Richard crouched stiffly, his joints aching, and placed his hands on her small shoulders. No, Emma, they're here for you. Because of what you can do. Emma tilted her head. But I don't want cameras. I just want Mommy to feel better. His chest tightened. And that is why we must protect you. But protection was already slipping from their grasp. By evening, government black cars were spotted circling the block. Pharmaceutical representatives began leaving messages, offering some so obscene even Richard's billionaire's mind staggered. Some begged, some threatened, some demanded. The final blow came at midnight. Gloria answered the house line, her face drained of all color. Sir, federal agents are petitioning for emergency custody. They claim Emma's ability is a matter of national public health. Sarah collapsed into a chair, her face gray with despair. They can't. She's my daughter. She's just a child. Richard slammed his cane against the floor, over my dead body. But the fight was no longer just his. That night, he gathered Sarah, Emma, Dr. Wilson, and even Gloria in the library. The fire blazed, shadows dancing on the walls. Richard stood before them, leaning heavily on his cane, yet every inch the general preparing his troops. They will not stop. The press, the corporations, the government. They will see her as a resource, not a child. They will try to take her, study her, drain her until nothing is left. I know this world. I built part of it, and I will not let it devour her. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was iron. Then what do? We can't stay here. We can't run forever. Emma clutched her rabbit tighter. I don't want to leave you, Mr. Harrington, or Mommy. Can't we all stay together? His throat tightened. He had thought his fortune would protect him from everything. But now he saw clearly. Money was a weapon, not a shield, and against this storm, he would need more than gold. He would need cunning, resolve, and the courage he had lost long ago. Tomorrow, Richard said, his voice low, I will move you somewhere safe, somewhere no one can reach. Until then, no one leaves this estate. Not you, not Emma, not even me. From this moment, every breath we take must be in defiance of those who want to own her gift. The room fell silent, the fire crackling like the heartbeat of the house. Sarah reached for Emma's hand. Richard felt the old bitterness in his chest twisting, melting into something new, something fiercer than despair. Not greed, not even hope. Love. It was the one thing the world could not buy, and he would wield it like a weapon to protect the child who had given him back his legs, and perhaps his soul. But even as he swore this silently, the distant sound of helicopters cut through the night sky, rattling the windows. The storm had already arrived. The Harrington estate, once a fortress of silence and wealth, no longer belonged to Richard. By dawn the next day, its iron gates were swarmed with reporters, flashing cameras, and black SUVs with tinted windows. The air was thick with the whir of helicopters circling above, their spotlights grazing the manicured lawns. Even behind thick drapes, Sarah could see the chaos pressing closer. Like a tide that would not recede, Emma sat at the kitchen table, swinging her small legs. A bowl of oatmeal, untouched in front of her. She clutched Mr. Whiskers so tightly his worn seams looked ready to burst. Her wide eyes flicked to the window every time the drone of engines echoed through the air. Mommy, she whispered, why are they here? Why do they want me? Sarah knelt in front of her, brushing strands of hair from her daughter's face. Because they don't understand you, baby. They think you're a secret they can own. But you're not. You're just my Emma. Richard, leaning on his cane, stood in the doorway, his sharp profile outlined against the morning light. His face was pale from exhaustion, his body still fragile despite his progress. But his eyes burned with a determination Sarah had never seen before. You are not theirs, he said firmly, and you never will be. But even as he spoke, the phone on the wall rang, its shrill cry splitting the silence. Gloria answered, her hand trembling. She listened for only a moment before her expression broke. Sir, it's the Department of Health. They've secured a court order, federal custody. They're coming today. Sarah's knees buckled. They can't. She's a child, my child. They can, and they will, Richard said darkly, gripping his cane until his knuckles whitened. Unless we move now. He had already arranged a contingency. The helicopter, the island, a web of private security meant to buy them time. But as he explained, his words faltered, his breath caught, his hand flew to his chest, and his cane clattered to the floor. Richard, Sarah gasped, his face contorted in pain, one side sagging. His words slurred. No, not now. His body crumpled into the chair, his eyes rolling back. Mr. Harrington, Emma screamed, scrambling off her stool. Sarah rushed to him, tears springing to her eyes as she recognized the signs her years of quiet hospital cleaning jobs had taught her the cruel truth. It's a stroke, she whispered, her voice breaking. Dear God, it's a stroke. Panic rippled through the room. Gloria fumbled for the phone, yelling for Dr. Wilson. The roar of helicopters grew louder outside. It felt as though the world itself was collapsing into the mansion. But Emma, her small hands shaking, climbed onto the chair beside Richard. No, she said fiercely, her voice louder than anyone expected from such a tiny body. No, I won't let you go, Emma, baby. Sarah tried to pull her back, but the girl's eyes glistened with something more than fear, something deeper. She pressed both palms against Richard's head. Come back, Mr. Harrington, please. Don't leave me. Don't leave Mommy. You promised. The air seemed to still, even the chaos outside dulled. As though the world held its breath, Richard's chest rose in shallow gasps, his skin clammy, his pulse weak. Then, slowly, as Emma's eyes squeezed shut and her lips trembled with silent words, warmth spread beneath her hands. Dr. Wilson burst into the room moments later, medical bag in hand, but froze as he saw the monitors that should have shown decline now spiking with life. His jaw dropped. This is impossible. Richard's fingers twitched. His lips moved. His eyes fluttered open. Emma. He-croaked. Sarah sobbed in disbelief, holding her daughter even as Emma sagged, pale as paper, her small body drained. She saved him, Sarah whispered. She saved him again. Richard struggled to sit up, his left arm still weak, but his voice steadying. He looked at Emma, then Sarah, then the circle of frightened, odd faces around him. Listen to me, he rasped. She cannot fall into their hands. They'll destroy her. They'll destroy everything she is, outside. The estate gates shuddered as officials pressed harder, reporters shouting, cameras flashing. Sirens wailed in the distance. Richard gripped Sarah's hand. You must take her, tonight. Use the boat. The world will come for her, but she belongs to no one. Not the government. Not corporations. Not even me. His voice cracked with an emotion Sarah had never heard from him before. Love. Emma stirred weakly, her small voice barely audible. I don't want to go without you. Richard bent closer, tears gathering in his eyes. Then I'll come to you, no matter what it takes. But for now, little one, you've given me back my life. Let me give you yours. Sarah looked at him, torn between terror and trust. For the first time since her husband abandoned her, she realized she wasn't carrying the burden alone. This broken man, this hardened millionaire, had been remade by her daughter's touch. Together, Sarah whispered fiercely, we'll protect her together. As night fell, the Harrington estate erupted in chaos. Agents at the gates, reporters swarming, the sound of shouts and pounding fists. But deep within the house, Emma slept in her mother's arms. Mr. Whiskers clutched tightly, her face peaceful despite the storm. And Richard Harrington, keen in hand, stood at the window, his silhouette outlined by the fire. He had risen from paralysis. He had returned from the edge of death. And now he would face down the world itself, because for the first time in years, he had something worth fighting for. Not wealth, not power, not even redemption. Family, and outside, as helicopters roared and flashbulbs lit the sky. The story of the miracle child swept across the world, unstoppable, unforgettable, and already demanding a reckoning.